The Slayer's time is now. All hail the coming of the Destroyer. He is
the unchained predator.
Amygdala, the Zerg, Brachydos, Deathclaw, Doom Demons, the Flood, Wormface. Some of the most unique, creative, badass, weird, and, well, downright terrifying creatures.
What the hell is even that?
Have been presented to us through video games. And there is definitely no shortage of impressive design creatures from both Western and Eastern devs. But when it comes to creature design, it does seem that Japanese devs have a special knack for making such wild and unique creature designs. Why is that though? Then again, the Japanese did make Evangelion, so I guess we shouldn't be too surprised when they make some of the wildest creature designs we've ever seen. Let's get right into it though, and rewind and take a look at these creatures from the beginning. Lady Mamiya is a ghost or a possession from a game called Sweet Home, developed and released by Capcom in 1989. Lady Mamiya transforms into a grotesque and deformed almost lump of just meat and muscle, with one thing on her mind: to murder you. Now, while you may look at Miss Lady Mamiya and say, well, she isn't super scary, while I agree, I need you to remember this game came out 34 years ago. Before Resident Evil, before Silent Hill, this game started that survival horror thriller genre, and by definition for the time, one of the most unique and terrifying creatures. While we're on the subject of horror games, during the late 90s and 2000s, that horror genre really started to flourish, and with it came some amazing creatures and designs. 1996, Resident Evil is released, produced by the dev Tokuro Fujiwara, who is the same developer who worked on Sweet Home. Now that we are in the world of 3D gaming, creatures like we've never imagined start to come to life and terrify us. From mutated reptilians spliced with human DNA, or mutated terrifying plant creatures, to literally giant, mutated, grotesque snakes and sharks. Looking at the Tyrant from Resident Evil, when you first see this creature, it's almost as if your brain wants to recognize it as human, but everything inside you tells you to shoot first and ask questions later. The more you look at it though, it's not only a dismembered, mutated human, but it stands over you at almost 9 feet tall, with these massive appendages and an arm that could easily pierce you. It's not surprising, even in 1996, why this game terrified people. When I say weird or unique, nothing best describes this though than creatures from games like Baroque from Sting Entertainment, or Shadow Tower from one of my favorite devs, From Software. I'm sure everyone is like, I've never heard of either of those games. With only examining these two video games though, it gives us creatures like Slothbug, which does not look much like a sloth, but terrifying still. Or maybe Warpor, a floating ghost snail nautilus thing, always a classic. Or one of my favorites, Sin Monis, or as I like to call him, the Glizzy Glucker Gooner 9000.
Entering Glizzy Overdrive. Okay? I'm just saying.
A rotten mushroom mixed with some type of bug and ball sacks? Okay, all jokes aside though, these are just a few creatures from games over 20 years ago, and they are just so incredibly damn weird and creative. I want to look at one more creature from Baroque, called the Nick R. We're just gonna call him Nick. Nick's actual description is a floating meta being consisting of two faces with tubes protruding from his body. It attacks with its large mouth. Nick almost looks like it's a floating heart with these two very angelic faces. This is actually two separate entities though that share a consciousness. And if that wasn't enough, the clasped hands it has in the middle opens up to literally eat you with a giant mouth that looks like a Venus flytrap. You might be thinking to yourself now, how has this autistic man not brought up any creatures from Silent Hill? Don't worry though, don't send me to the Shadow Realm just yet. I wanted to specifically talk about designs from Silent Hill 2.
I'm so fucking scared right now!
Most of us would probably think about Silent Hill when talking about unique creatures from Japanese devs. And, well, we would be right. Well, okay, maybe not that one. Yeah, I don't know about you guys. I'm not giving up hope just yet.
It's not true!
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
That Silent Hill 2 trailer has me sweating a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. Silent Hill is the only video game to have a creature named Pyramid Head that is absolutely terrifying. Each monster and creature seems to be crafted right out of someone's nightmare.
Me down as scared and horny.
These creatures and characters that were developed almost 25 to 30 years ago still hold up today. Not only hold up, they're infamous. A man by the name of Masahiro Ito, often considered one of the godfathers of creature designs, took these creatures to a completely new level during Silent Hill 2. Ito has stated for himself that most of these creatures were designed to be terrifying to the human psyche, and from the human psyche. Which, if you haven't played Silent Hill 2, that line makes a lot more sense once you understand the story. I brought up Silent Hill 2 because of creatures like Bubblehead Nurse, Pyramid Head, this bundle of meat, the wonderful mannequins, and of course, the classic Abstract Daddy. There are so many impressive creature designs in video games.
Look familiar?
And I've already left out so many from titles like Shadow Colossus, Xenoblade, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest. Truly, there were Japanese devs and creators definitely have a very special and unique design with their creatures in horror-type games. But their creativity does not stop there. Some of the most impressive and excellent crafted creatures goes directly to a series of games that may have made you want to set your own house on fire at times. Anyone who has played Souls-like games before knows the feeling of stepping into a boss room only to be greeted by a monster or a creature that looks like it came straight out of the Bible. Creatures that you look upon that are at times god level, but you know you have one job: to kill it. I want you to think about a specific monster in one of the Souls-like games. The one you saw for the first time, and you unironically say, "Oh shit," to yourself. But at the same time, you're excited to cross blades with a beast your mind can barely comprehend. It's a great feeling. Well, until that honeymoon phase of the fight is over, and you've died 17 times, and you're 1000% sure the hitboxes are absolute bullshit, and instead of making the boss harder, they just made it spin a million times in a row.
Wait, what? What happened exactly? So that one hits, okay.
But before that, when the feeling is still in awe and not absolutely unfiltered rage. From Software has such a special gift when creating the designs for their creatures. Just look at Bloodborne, another one of my favorite games. Truly almost every entity you interact with feels so carefully crafted to have a distinct presence. In Bloodborne, when you walk into the fight with Moon Presence, and he is just shadowed by the moon and slowly floats down. As the camera pans, you see this creature is just a spine covered in human flesh and bone. But when you finally see his face, you see nothing except these tentacles of like an eldritch type being with a hole for his face. And then he grabs your body and then proceeds to either suck your soul or, well, suck you off. I'm not sure which is more terrifying. After looking at a few creatures from Japanese devs that were very interesting, obscure, and, well, pretty weird at times.
No, don't like that.
What is it that gives them such a unique outlook here, though? It's not like Japanese devs have some monopoly on making good video games. You can find amazing games from American devs and all around the world. If I had to guess, I do think a good place to start looking, though, is at their culture.
Drop it. Yeah.
The culture that you grew up in definitely plays a factor here. To explain what I mean by that is, I'm an American.
What the fuck?
And while I may be mostly Scandinavian, I still grew up in American culture, so what feels familiar to me is not necessarily going to feel familiar to someone who, say, grew up in Japanese culture. So it could very well be we are just more used to Western or American design and culture than we are to, say, Japanese design and culture. So when looking at these Japanese creatures, they feel foreign to us. Now, by all means, I am definitely no expert in Japanese culture, but from what I've researched, the Japanese have a very deep and interesting history with their cryptids and creatures. And when you look into them, they have a ton of these mythological beings or creatures. Side note, if you do want to look more into their history, one video I really enjoyed was from this channel. FYI, if you're not aware, a yokai is just the Japanese term for like demons and ghosts and such. Sazei Oni, a turbaned snail of great age, typically 30 years, which has gained the ability to turn into a woman.
It's ma'am. It is ma'am.
And also likes to eat men's balls. Shironori, born out of a dish towel or kitchen rag, which has seen too many years of usage. So it's essentially a dirty rag that you should have washed, but you don't wash it, so it comes alive and whoops your ass. You may be thinking, oh, that's definitely a super rare or obscure yokai. But it's popular enough that it was literally a main boss in the Japanese Power Rangers. So do with that what you will. Ten, or Itachi, a mischievous, shape-shifting weasel. Tofu Kozo, a yokai that appears as a young boy carrying a tray of tofu. Hikeshibuba, an old woman who extinguishes lanterns. Kamikiri, a yokai that secretly cuts the hair on people's heads. Makuragaishi, a yokai that flips pillows and moves sleepers' bodies. Mikoshi Niedo, a bald goblin with an extending neck that enjoys scaring people by peeking over the top of folding screens.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Namazu, a giant catfish dwelling beneath the earth that causes earthquakes when it moves. As funny as some of these are, you start to immediately notice, yeah, sure, some are goofy, but they are very unique, and honestly, each one has very deep lore behind it, even the ones you think wouldn't have it. It also makes you think of some of the creatures we have already looked at. Seems we are starting to draw some connections here. The Japanese have a long history of rich storytelling, which includes a lot of creatures and gods, mythological beings. But a big part, I believe, is that the history of all of these still play a large part of Japanese culture. I mentioned earlier, a lot of my heritage is Scandinavian, going back to the Danes. A lot of cultures back then worship the Norse gods, but nowadays I live in America. I'm an American. But America is a country for lots of diverse cultures and backgrounds. If you look at Japan, though, it is 98.1% Japanese. They all collectively share their rich and creative history, so it still plays a large part even in today's times. And to add on to that, I think it's very clear the Japanese place a large appreciation on respect, which includes that culture and history. Well, mostly. The Japanese were so fiercely loyal and had so much respect for their country that after World War II was over and Japan surrendered, Japanese soldiers that had holdouts all over the Pacific Islands that were previously a part of the Japanese Empire, these soldiers would literally not surrender when Allied soldiers tried to coax them out of their holdouts and holes. They did not believe that Japan would surrender, so they kept on engaging Allied soldiers. In addition to their culture, the Japanese tend to have a very distinctive art style, which often includes vibrant colors, expressive characters, and imaginative worlds. And this visual aesthetic can set Japanese games apart and make them visually appealing to players.
Thank you. Then, would you like a thorough examination?
Look at Elden Ring. When you walk in to fight Radahn, you first see Radahn in his cutscene, and you don't really know what to expect, as the game itself does not give you a ton of information on him. But you immediately notice his dominating presence. He has this intimidating aura where he wields these two huge swords in full armor. You look around and there's a war-torn battlefield all around him, and you know this creature was an absolute beast of a warrior, and he has been fighting his whole life. But then it almost seems like he is a broken down warrior, a broken down demigod. Well, until you start fighting him and realize he is anything but broken. Even with such little information just from Radahn's incredible design, presence, and environment, it tells so much about him. If we look at Silent Hill and Mashiro Ito again, when he was working on creating his creature designs, he had stated several times that he gets inspiration from people like Francis Bacon, Horst Jansen, and Magdalena Abakanowicz. Even Hideo Kojima has talked about his inspiration from Western ideas. The Japanese don't just use their own culture, they seem to take ideas from all around the world and try to make them their own. Now, this next part is definitely more of my opinion, and I do believe it's more of a recent thing, but it really feels nowadays that Western devs, and probably especially American ones, try to make their games very safe. It's as if they have so much money invested in these games now that they are terrified to try anything new or maybe weird or unique, for the reason of if they fail or this game flops, oh shit, we are $200 million in a hole now and we're all going to lose our jobs. So we just keep getting these very bland games while the Japanese are still making these floating snails with two dicks and one ball.
A butt, two kneecaps, a penis. I have just described to you the Loch Ness Monster.
Now, I'm fully aware uniqueness or creativity is one of those things where it's different to each person, and sometimes there isn't one answer. We have had some of the most amazing IPs that have given us some of the most creative, unique, and excellent creatures to ever be featured in games. And these creatures have come from lots of different developers, but it always seems to go back almost as a speciality that Japanese devs have a strong and obscure grasp on creature design. Now, to be fair, it does not always play out, but they always do seem to be very unique. I am curious though, what do you guys think? Is there more to it than just different cultures? Do we get too much tunnel vision on, say, devs like From Software, so we look over maybe Western devs with great designs? I do want to say, I really appreciate it if you took time out to even listen to a bit of this video. It means a lot to me because I really do try on them. I hope everyone has an amazing rest of the week though. I love you all. Noble